This episode is brought to you by 10 Yetis Digital. We started using these guys at the beginning of the year and we've had great results. They're an online public relations agency that manage influencer marketing campaigns, social media campaigns, design. They do design, and they cover sort of multiple sectors, brands big and small. Highly recommended. That's 10yetis.co.uk. Welcome to the Tech Leaders Podcast. When I heard about this business, I was determined to get one of the founders on. Peter Dowds, great guy, couple of entrepreneurial endeavours beforehand, came up with this amazing idea of essentially providing an alternative to the traditional care home through a technology platform and a network of live-in carers. A national network of living carers, which really is quite special. I think it's going to disrupt this sector massively over the next couple of years. It's very, very exciting. We talk about his journey as an entrepreneur. We talk about the disruption around COVID and what the impact that's had on Elder. We talk about the challenges that surrounds an ageing population. And many, many more things. It's full of value. It's one of my favourite interviews I've ever done. I really enjoyed it. It's Peter Dowds. Peter Dowds, thank you for coming on the show. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, doing well, doing good.
Great stuff. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Really excited about this one because you guys are doing some great things in a very important sector and a sector that's been heavily hit recently. So we can unpack that shortly. But to start with, I'm keen to find out about you, and your journey. Okay. So give us a bit of a summary, Peter, in terms of your career from sort of point of education through to the present.
Yeah, for sure. So actually originally from Chester in England and then moved to Scotland when I was a teenager. So spent my teenage years in Stirling in Scotland, and then went to university in Sheffield, actually. So went kind of the very boring track of studied law and then became a lawyer. So followed that well-trodden path, I think, from uni down to the city in London and did corporate law. So basically became a corporate lawyer for 6 years at a firm called DLA Piper, an American law firm.
Yeah.
And I think after it's strange, isn't it? You kind of spend 6 years training to be a lawyer, and weirdly, I kind of knew after a year that I didn't want to be one. So you start thinking about what the hell have I done, and spent 5 years trying to get out. But enjoyed it. I think you work very hard. You work very long hours. You work with really smart people. But for me, I knew I wanted to I didn't feel I wanted to kind of solve problems, and I'd worked with some great entrepreneurs when I was a lawyer, and kind of wanted to give it a go myself. So actually me and my friend Tom, who I've co-founded both Mop and Elder with, we went to university together. We were like doors apart in Hall's residence. Then we lived together in London for years, and we actually had a business. Our first business, we tried to import Japanese beer, so Sapporo, from Japan into the UK. So we imported it, that's for sure. So we imported like a container of beer over. Dropped it off Tom as a farm in Suffolk, and then we kind of sold it in London pubs and restaurants and bars. The only issue is we had to sell it cheaper than we bought it. So business went down in flames. But we had a great time. I think for me and him, Tom was a trader at the time, and it was kind of nights and weekends, just doing something to kind of scratch that itch. But then we actually started proper. It was a business called Mop. So, at the back end of 2012, for Tom and I, we'd had a really hard time ourselves finding a cleaner for our flat in Whitechapel. And I had this idea for us where it's like, look, you could book a ton of stuff at that time. Uber and Halo were just getting started in London. Airbnb was at the very start. There was booking.com. So you could book all this stuff, but you couldn't book like a cleaner. And so that was our first company. So we launched that at the start of 2013. Just me and him, still in our jobs. So, we basically just got a person at our old university, Sheffield, to design a website for us. I think it was about $1,000 that used, I think we were one of Stripe's first customers in the UK, actually integrated Stripe into it. And you could basically book on the homepage, and there was no back end. It was just like a site that would take payment, and we'd get an email that said someone had booked. And if we deleted that email, we had no record of them booking with Mop. But, you know, we started that, and I remember, you know, we were doing crazy things like I was jumping out of meetings in an office was in St. Paul's and to interview cleaners in Starbucks and stuff like that, because we actually had our first bookings before we actually had any cleaners. We just wanted to see if people would do it. Would they trust enough to book a cleaner online? And they did. So that was Tom and, you know, we started that in I think it was January 2013, just me and him. Then we left our jobs, kind of put all our savings in, and over a period of a year, we kind of scaled it to about 1,000 bookings a month. So, you know, it really started to get going. And then raise some investment, and then it kind of exploded. We went from, I think there's 4 of us at the time, and we went to a team of 50 within about 7 weeks, because we really then started to invest the money we'd raised into things like product and marketing and all sorts of stuff. And I think basically by probably around the middle part of 2014, we'd had about, you know, 50,000 customers use the service. So it grew really, really quickly. And then we ultimately sold that company to the American market leader called Handy. So we were kind of one of the leaders in the UK. And then I'd got to know Oshin, who was the CEO at Handy, and we went back and forth a bit. Wasn't planning to sell, to be honest. We were still pretty, you know, we were only 2 years into the journey, but I think for that market, you know, we'd got to be one of the leaders in London, and we really had a lock on that city. And I think for that made us pretty valuable to certain other companies. And for us, it was looking like a very competitive industry. So we thought actually partnering up made sense. And that was, September 2014 when the sale went through, and then spent around a year and a half working basically with Handy, so leading their international business, spending a bit of time, most of the time in London, a bit of time in New York, doing some stuff. So that was great. It was kind of going from, you've got that first whiplash experience of building your own thing, all the pitfalls and the highs and lows that come with it. And then you go to be something, so then you see it at a bigger scale. So, you know, once we got to a certain level, and then what's it like when there's hundreds of employees, and what's it like when you've got tens of millions of revenue? What needs to change? How does a product need to evolve? How does a culture evolve? What gets pretty hard to do? You know, it was actually a really good experience. Went in thinking, God, what's this going to be like? You know, an American company. It's going to be a complete culture clash. We'll hate it. But in reality, like Oshin and Among, the 2 founders, are great. They're really good friends now. And it was great. I went back, you know, we kind of went back to learning, and then it was a year and a half there before kind of left to take the plunge with Elder. So yeah, that's a kind of a whistle stop tour through the last kind of 10 years or so.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, it's been it sounds like it's been a bit of a roller coaster then, but it sounded like, there was a consistent desire to pursue entrepreneurial endeavors throughout your career then, clearly. Where does that come from?
I originally wanted to be a footballer. So up until the age of 15, I was kind of playing professional youth and wanted to do that. Then I clearly wasn't good enough. So that you know, that goes to the side, and then kind of knuckled down on school and did the law thing. But I think it was really, for me, I think it was at uni and others that really started to think about, just those, you'd always have ideas. And I think those things, and I always loved like just, you know, spitballing on, going back and forth with someone. And, you know, that was Tom and Tom for me, where we'd go back and forth on tons of stuff. I mean, we had all sorts of crazy ideas. I mean, the beer was one of them, which was insane economically, a lot of fun to do. The little ones, we were going to, you know, just, crazy stuff where we probably had 3 or 4 like things that didn't get off the ground before we landed on Mop. But I think it's almost it's almost a curiosity as well, like liking to solve problems. You know, when you see something and you kind of wonder, oh, what if? I wonder if you could do that, you know, but actually pulling the thread a bit further than some others would, and digging in and actually seeing, look, what would it take? And that's kind of been the same for me with both. I think with Mop, you know, we started with, why can't you book a cleaner? And we went from there. And then with Elder, as you know, in the current business, it's been the same way, you know, and seeing some tough experiences in families and stuff like that, using that as a thing to kind of go forward from. So yeah, it's always, definitely since kind of university, it's always kind of been with, you know, lots of ideas and back and forth.
Yeah. So what are the main lessons you learned from? Let's home in on Mop, because that was obviously the lion's share of the experience. You probably didn't learn so much about the beer from the beer company, apart from not selling things at a loss. Yeah. But from Mop, obviously you built it, you scaled, you had a successful exit. Sounds like an amazing platform that you built, and you became the market leader in London. So it was a resounding success, clearly. So what did you learn from that experience, which has benefited you up until now and is going to benefit you going forward in your pursuits with Elder?
Yeah, I mean, wow, there's a ton. I think I mean, the biggest one that probably stands to me, I think, in terms of building companies and doing successfully, like a ton of lessons in people. I think, when you first go in, I'll be honest, when we started Mop, I didn't have a clue how to build a company, but specifically, like when it comes to people, how do you find the best people? How do you keep them? How do you get a team working together? Like, what's the best way to do that? How are decisions made? There's a lot around that, I think, for me, where really spending the time when you're hiring, it's very easy when you're growing quickly as well to just hire anyone. It's almost at one point at Mop, a dog could have probably walked into the business and we'd thrown a MacBook at them and said, get to work and help us out. But that doesn't scale. So I think for me, definitely in terms of taking the time to really put enough time into yourself as a leader, to a lot of your time, if once you're kind of up and running, should be hiring, meeting people, screening people, and really, finding the best talent. And then also thinking a lot about developing that talent. So actually, what I found in both businesses I've run is we've had some amazing people start very entry level jobs, but actually work their way up pretty quickly. I think it's amazing how people can stretch if it's not about what someone's done in their career, it's about what you think they can do in a role. So I've always kind of liked to do that as well, hire for potential, and really work with someone to challenge them, of course. But if you feel they've got kind of those kind of core fundamentals there, they're very resilient, they're going to really put the effort in. They make good decisions. I think it's really worth investing in those people because they're real culture carriers as well. It's great to have that mix of people that not everyone will scale with the business, but some will. And it's amazing to have them be part of it, over a number of years. I mean, there's other ones like, I think for me, it's like understand the economics of a business. I think once you're up and running as well, it was great as well. We were obsessed about the customer. So really building great experience for the customers, thinking about the cleaners, but also we probably didn't spend enough time thinking about the underlying economics of what we were doing. We were in an industry that was brutally competitive. So in London at one point, there was probably 5 or 6 different companies going at the home services space after we'd started. And, if you've only all got the same channels to use, say that's paid search or others, there's one thing that happens there, which is that the prices go up. It gets more expensive to buy customers. I think as well, just on the underlying service for us in cleaning, for instance, it was always harder on retention because with the value, once you've connected someone together with a cleaner, what extra value can you provide to your customer that's going to make them stick around? And I think to that end, we could definitely do it. We started handyman services and you do other stuff, but it's still limited. So for me, it's like some of those fundamentals, it can be hard to improve them. You can be operationally excellent, but it will only get you so far. So for me, it was kind of really, I think, more thought. Going into Elder, there was a lot more thought I put in at the start onto like, how do we build something that's actually differentiated, something that is unique that other people aren't doing? So whether that's the customer segment, the type of customer we're approaching, the particular, the way we're building our service, like what is truly different about us, and like then the same applies to how do we find customers? How do we do that in a way that no one else is doing? How do we reach a new audience? Lots of stuff there where I think at Mop, because it was business number one, it was just like, I mean, it's like being in a washing machine, right? You're just like one day after another, like growth at all costs, let's go. And that is amazing. We scaled really, really quickly, but it has, like, you hit the top of that S curve, I think, and things can get trickier. So yeah, there was a ton, I think, on the people side, unit economics, fundamentals, and then also on the investor side, I think for me with Mop, when you think back to the term sheets you kind of negotiated and signed second time around, there's no way in hell you'd sign the same thing. But no better, first time around. Probably I should have known better. I was a lawyer and had been involved a bit, but it's all new. Things like when we started Mop, I didn't know what unit economics were or marketplaces or venture capital. I genuinely didn't really I wasn't that aware of that stuff. It was all very new. And you're just like, I'm building something with my best mate and I'm having a great time doing it. But it all gets very serious very quickly. If you've got something, then you've got employees and all of that. So yeah, I think more kind of planning earlier on would have helped. But still, it was an amazing. It was great fun.
No, I'm sure it was. Yeah, I'd give you the taste for it then, I suppose, didn't you? You wanted to go and do it all again.
That's the problem now. Yeah, once you've done it once.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk us through that. That's a good segue into my next question. Actually, I was going to ask you about why social care. Where did that come from?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So I think coming out of Mop and then spending about 1.5 years with Handy, we knew, I think, for myself, it was that about 6 months into Handy, that wasn't going to be a long-term thing. We'd signed a retention deal to stay for a certain period of time after the acquisition, which made sense. But once you have, to your point, once you've built something, I wanted to do it again, but I wanted to do it differently. It's kind of like the difficult second album, isn't it? You know, you've got to go, you've got to go bigger and better than the first.
Yeah.
And for me, where social care came from was like, for my family anyway, you know, we had a pretty tough time. I think, you know, particularly on my mum's side with my gran down, who lived in Deal in Kent. So for my mum, my aunties, a really hard time trying to find the right care for it, where, you know, you start doing it yourselves and then that gets tricky, and then maybe you have some carers that pop in and out, but that can be pretty hard to organize as well, and it's hard to arrange. You don't know if they're turning up, you don't know what's going on, and finally I guess it was a care home, and I think the whole industry for us, the thing that struck me was you feel railroaded into it. It's like there's no other option. Like you know, kind of for 200 years the care home's been this thing. You know, it comes from Victorian poorhouses in the 19th century, where people that weren't able to look after themselves anymore got sent. And weirdly now it's become like this accepted practice. This is what you do when you get to a certain level of need. It's time to leave your home that you've spent decades in and move on off to a care home. And that, again, going back to the curiosity piece and the solution, it was that for me, I think, where it's like, well, why? You know, it's that bit, you know, I think for me, I looked at loads of other stuff, you know, whether that's like crazy stuff, food delivery, you know, probably 5 or 6 different businesses, but went down the rabbit hole of elderly care and just never came out of it. I think it's one of those interesting industries. I kind of, even when I was learning about it before we started, you start to kind of break it all apart and you see the sheer size of the problem, like how many people. So even in care homes, you've probably got about 500,000 people in the UK now in care homes. You know, your 85 plus population is going to double in the next 20 years. So, you know, just when you think of that, I mean, and the interesting bit is the number of care homes isn't increasing. So you've got the number of people needing this type of care rocketing each year, probably growing by about 7% a year, but then the number of beds available for people not growing. And also people don't really like the solution.
Why is that? That's crazy to me, because there seems to be like, you know, I see, you know, care homes all the time in sort of around our area, and I see new ones being put up and stuff. Obviously it's just not keeping pace with the demand though, but you would have thought that these companies are staying on top of this because there's obviously a commercial opportunity for them, you know, social care home companies or whatever, you know. So why are they not meeting demand? Is there a reason?
I mean, it's really interesting, right? This kind of, once you break apart the care industry as well, there's kind of different parts to it. So when I think of, often when people think of care homes, you think of the more modern ones and the newer ones, but actually, you know, kind of 85% of care homes in the UK are more than 50 years old. And they tend to be pretty small, you know, so there's thousands of care homes across the UK. So although at the moment, I think there's maybe about 4,000 new beds coming in every year, the same number are disappearing from older ones shutting down. And I think what you see from that is if you're in, say you're a smaller operator, so you've maybe got 1 or 2 sites, when you start to think about, so you've got an older property, you start to think about the increasing cost of maintaining that property. You know, there's the cost of regulation. You're finding it increasingly hard to find good carers because of your model, you know, you feel you're only in a position to pay the minimum wage.
Yeah.
If you're going to pay someone minimum wage to be a carer, they're not going to stick around. That's really hard. You know, it's just, I mean, it's insane. People call carers unskilled workers, which is probably one of the most offensive things I think you can say. When, I mean, for me, it's one of the most skilled jobs going. To be a great carer, you need to be part, you know, you need to be almost a counselor for someone. You're meant to be a friend, a family member. It takes such skill. But for those people, so you've got that increasing property costs, you've got rising people costs. Maybe then you have to use agencies, so they come with a premium to find your staff. All of these things whirling around, the cost of, you know, complying with regulation getting more expensive. And I think for some people, for some smaller operators, that puts them in a bind where they're just not able to continue. Particularly then when COVID starts and other stuff, when then you've got other costs to think about like PPE and others that you having to buy some yourself. And then you've got the bigger operators like Four Seasons or Barchester or HC1, where they are dominated by private equity. So kind of in the early 2000s, private equity came in really aggressively into the care home sector to invest. They saw a big opportunity, a macro level of, you know, like we just talked about, aging population and all of these different things, but they levered these businesses up with debt. So basically you've got some huge operators. So if we take Four Seasons, which sadly went into administration recently, you know, I think they had about 30,000 beds in the UK. I mean, at one point, I think people were paying about 150 to 170 pounds a week per bed just to help pay the interest costs on the debt from the private equity owners. So, you know, that money is just going to service debt that's been put on the business. And again, it's those types of dynamics at the bigger side of the market where it's put people in a tricky spot. And I think it's the same. There's so many amazing people in the care home sector doing great work, but definitely in the round, when you look at it, it's an industry that's having a hard time and struggling. And then there's also the cost for, just to touch on how care's funded. So when it comes to full-time care, the care home sector in the UK, around 50%, roughly 50% of people pay for their own care because they have over £23,000 of assets, and around 50% of people don't have that amount of assets. So they receive funding from local authorities. And again, when it's the local authorities that are buying those beds in homes, they're continually pushing the pressure down on the price. So for care homes that are reliant on those types of people staying in their homes, it's got harder and harder because your wages for your carers are going up, or you're trying to, but the price you're getting from the local authorities going down or staying flat and not keeping in track with inflation. So there's to be honest, we could talk for hours about the struggles of the care home sector, but definitely for me, it was these types of things where what I ultimately see from all this business kind of talk is it makes the experience worse. So, for the people staying in those homes, for the family members that are trying to make the right decision, all of those things, it's for a lot of people in homes across the UK, I think they're kind of being done a disservice. It's not really what any of us would want for our loved ones at the end, towards the later stages of their life. And for me personally, I just fundamentally disagree with the premise that the default option should be for someone to go to a care home. I think every effort should be made to keep, I think when they've done surveys, it's always been 90% plus of people want to stay at home. If you can age in place, why would you go anywhere else? You spend 50, 60 years of your life in a place with all your memories, and where it becomes also the go-to point in my family, where it's everyone returns to it, right? All the brothers and sisters, and then the grandchildren, everyone goes to, your grandmoms, your granddads. And I think if that was the thinking for me starting Elder, was I wonder if you could maintain that. What solution could we do? And for us, that's living care, where a carer moves into the home. But, how could you make that happen? So actually someone gets to keep living their routine, so it's all the little things. It can be as simple as, maybe it's going for a blow dry once a week. I think my gran used to do that regularly. Or maybe it's going to church or the bowls club. Or, there's 2 or 3 people around you that you like spending time with. My gran was a sports obsessive. She loved to watch sport on the TV. So, that would always be on. But when you go into a care home environment, that gets harder because it's everyone together. It's this big melting pot where it's not really about your routine anymore. It's about the routine of the care home, whether that's when you're eating or what food you're eating, when you go into bed, all those types of things that I kind of think they get eroded. And I think ultimately for me, it's life isn't just how many years are you here for, how long are you alive? It's more than that. It's what is the quality of it? And I think particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, it isn't just about being alive for as long as possible. It's about being alive, but enjoying that to the extent you can, and keeping intact all the things you really kind of hold dear. And there may be very weird little quirks and things that people like to do, and they've got their very particular foods they like, etc. But I think it's all about trying to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading, I think The Guardian reported yesterday that there was 16,000 deaths in care homes over the course of this pandemic period. And I'm not in any way pouring scorn on care homes, because the people who work in these places are incredible. I totally agree with you. They are. It is about as highly skilled as you can possibly get, because you're dealing with so much complexity. Just because it's not a sort of an established profession per se, then it doesn't mean that it's not complex and stuff. And these people do an incredible job. But I mean, nonetheless, there has still been a disproportionate amount of deaths in care homes over the course of this period. So obviously that makes your platform potentially a desirable option for families, okay, who are in this situation going forward if we do have a second, third wave, you know what I mean? So are you seeing demand pick up as a result of that? What is your thoughts on the current circumstances and the current situation we're in?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. And, the short answer is yes, demand has, whether that's conversion, so the number of people converting through, there's just a lot more immediacy, I think, particularly in the last 3 months, of families that really want to make that decision quicker. Some people actually taking their loved ones out of care homes and into using Elder, so back home. But a lot of people where, I think for a challenge like us, so, ultimately what's Elder? We're a technology-enabled living care service. So with Elder, instead of moving your loved one to a care home, Elder provides a professional carer who literally moves into the home. They get a spare bedroom and they become kind of like another member of the family.
They're full-time then?
Full-time,
I thought this was sort of a drop-in sort of type social
No,
care?
so this is we're very much focused on helping people with full-time care needs. So when they're at a point when which is really, when you look at the care sector, that's where the majority of the problem is. You know, if you look at the size of, so the domiciliary care, visiting care in the UK is probably about a 4 or 5 billion pound a year market. In terms of full-time care, it's closer to 20 billion. So there's a lot more, I think, need for a full-time care solution. And so, yeah, so for us, it's pretty unique, but basically, you know, we support people basically where they get a bespokely matched carer that moves in with their loved one and will be there. So actually, in relation to COVID, it is definitely been seen, I think, for people where it's like, actually, this is safer because it's not in an environment where there's lots of people. It's just my mum or dad, and it's one carer. And we actually, yeah, it was interesting. I had someone from Downing Street reach out a couple of weeks ago, and we had a call because I think they've been seeing that, you know, with Elder and some of the data we've seen, that, you know, it's shocking to see what's happened in the care sector, and it's really tough for everyone involved. But, you know, you're seeing that maybe 6 or 7% of people have been passing away that have been resident there. And for Elder, you know, we're kind of down below 0.8%. So, you know, it's kind of 90% or so less mortality through our service than the care. And I think for that, you know, that it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think from a transmission perspective and others going forward, you can just create that environment that's better. But I think the really exciting thing for us at Elder, I think, in all of this, as tough as it's all been, is it's a chance for us to kind of accelerate the education of people about living care. I think the UK as a whole, people and families and brothers and sisters are more ready to listen and think about an alternative, because there's so much inertia around the care sector, which signposts people towards it, whether that's your GP, whether that's a hospital. Everyone, the system is geared up to help put someone towards a care home. But now there's a lot more people are starting to think, actually, no, wait, is there anything else out there? And them asking that question puts us in a great position of the work we've been doing in the last 4 years at Elder to be ready, you know, as we've been growing really quickly, but continuing to educate people on that. Well, what the hell is living care? Most people don't know. 98% of the population probably don't know what we do. Like, what is it? How does this service work? How much does it cost? Like, breaking apart all of those things for people has been the thing for us. But yeah, it's been a really busy last few months for the team, because it's, you know, we've been growing pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think inertia is a really good word to describe the social care sector. I think one thing that kind of stood out for me, I think it kind of needs a rebrand, doesn't it? I mean, social care has got this institutional reputation of the going back to the 200 years, like you said. It's still got that. It hasn't shaken that off, has it? It's even though it's super modernized since then, obviously. But I mean, it's still got this brand which isn't. You know, which does put some people off, I suppose. But yeah, you know, in terms of putting their relatives into these places, but I'm sure a lot of them are really good and things. But just so the listeners, you know, understand your model, and we're very clear on it then. So you provide, you know, the in-care, you know, you essentially recruit carers then, yeah? You provide a technology platform for them to liaise with family members and things like that? Is that or does it, you know, where does the tech part come in?
Yeah, so look, technology is fundamental to what we do. So, I mean, at its core, yeah, so absolutely. So at Elder, you get that. So you'll be matched with a full-time carer who will do normally around 3 to 4 weeks at a time. And then there'll be another carer as part of your carer team that will fill the gap. So while your main carer is having a break, they'll then move in for a week or so. And basically create a very small bespoke team that will help look after your loved one 365 days a year, 24/7. But technology does, you know, in terms of so now, I mean, at Elder, we've delivered about 400 or so thousand days of care, you know, across the UK, and done it in around maybe 320, 330 towns and cities. So the interesting thing about the Elder model is it's not, you know, if you think about an Uber or even my last business, Mark, you could only really do city by city, town by town, because you had to on the ground recruit all the cleaners, and then they can only travel maybe 20 minutes to a job, because otherwise they can't earn enough each day to make it work. But for Elder, because someone's moving in for a period of time, they're actually happy. They'll maybe travel a little bit further. They're more relaxed. So you can cover a much bigger geographic area. So I think now there's 122 postcode areas in the UK, and we've delivered care in 121 of them. So the Outer Hebrides is the one last place we need to get an Elder carer in. So that'll be happening hopefully sometime soon. But, you know, to be able to do that without technology, we would have no chance. And I mean, some of the areas it really makes a difference. You know, I talked there earlier about matching. So in some businesses, like my first business, Mop, it was kind of the traveling salesman problem. How do you move people around cities efficiently? But really at Elder, it flips on its head, because it's not so much about logistics. It's more around the quality of the relationship between the person, the carer, and who they're looking after.
Yeah.
How do you get that right? And that isn't just, you can't use some sort of taxi rank principle where, one carer is the same as another. Anything but. Everyone's different. And so to get that match right on both sides, we use a ton of data points around the background of the carer, so their experience, their particular types of care skills. So do they have experience with certain types of dementia or Parkinson's, all the way through to, are you okay looking after someone that has a dog? So all these things, doing the heavy lifting to make sure that we do everything we can to get the quality of the match right.
Yeah.
And that's where we've invested a lot on the technology side, a system called Elder Match, which makes those matches and does it year round. And then we have the main piece is what we call Care OS, but effectively an operating system, a care delivery system that delivers this end-to-end care. So whether that is the communication with the family, whether that's helping the family provide a lot of information about their loved one, their medical background, their personal history, the care environment, so the home, the community, what's there, taking all of that information and using that so it's visible to the carer. They know where to go and when and what to do and who to speak to, getting communication going, the billing, then starting to think about other stakeholders, so GPs and others. There is so much happening behind the scenes. And really what I wanted to do is at Elder for us to be able to take away all that heavy lifting from the carers and other people in the family. So your family has peace of mind. They can really help, focus on your loved ones. So make sure you're staying in touch with your mum or your dad, but don't worry, we're taking care of the care. And then for the carers, look, you focus on the person you're looking after. Don't be worrying about all this other stuff that gets put on you with kind of more traditional agencies and others, but being able to do it in a much bigger way. So to that bit, I didn't have any desire to build something that was small and in one location. And I think as well, often for this service, I wanted it to be available everywhere. So, for LD, our customers aren't just in London, maybe about 30% are in the Midlands. We've got 15% or so in Scotland, the Southwest Cornwall, Wales, our customers are everywhere. And I love that, because that's really what we want to do here is, as we scale, is really make an impact for everyone, not just be kind of London centric. But also the service gets better and better as you get to that scale point. For every carer and customer we're adding into the Elder service, the experience gets better. Every day, more is the chance that you'll find the right carer, more is the chance for the carer that they get the right customer for them. So it is, and technology is kind of doing an incredible amount of work. And I think for us now, increasingly, we start to look to care delivery. So, we started with further up in the discovery and connecting people and matching them in communication and billing, but now looking at how can you help the carer deliver better care? So giving them insights from the data coming out of the home, because I think we're in a pretty privileged position where we're with the customer 24/7. So that's, really interesting, unique position to be in.
Well, that's a massive opportunity for you, I think, isn't it? Is the data you're going to obtain off the back of this scale that you're achieving.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you'll get macro data, which will be of massive value in years to come, or maybe even in the shorter term,
You can all sorts of, I think, look, from a machine learning and other perspective, if you think about the range of data you can have when you have that high frequency of relationship with the customer and the carer being there, in terms of things, even little things like, basically some people might be predisposed towards certain things, or giving carers insights where, let's say, potentially the person they're looking after isn't drinking enough water, and they're using the bathroom a lot. All of these little things that could indicate certain things, whether that's a urinary tract infection or others, being able to, give flags and warnings to the carer to look at certain things or get a sense of certain things, to basically try and help people prevent going back into primary care. Because I think the real risk often when you're older is sometimes a very innocuous little thing will result in a hospital admission. And then when you're in that hospital, you struggle to get back out, because then people want to put you, now it's time to go to a care home, or, there's a delay in getting there. And they call it bed blocking, in the pretty offensive term, right? As if the person's blocking the bed. They're normally ready to leave, but there's nowhere to go for them.
Yeah.
But, if you spend, basically, I think the evidence has shown, if you spend 7 days longer than you need to in a hospital bed, and you're basically horizontal lying there, you can lose up to 7% of your muscle capability. So that's the type of stuff that means that what could be a very simple thing going into hospital completely transforms the person's ability to live a longer life in a healthy way. So I think for us, definitely, like, how can we at Elder do more to help keep people healthier, and provide those insights to carers, to know when a community nurse needs to come in, to know when a doctor needs to be brought in. That's, for me, pretty exciting. It's not easy to do these things, and it takes time, but like, that's really exciting.
Yeah, I was reading something recently about, this is more generic advice for, in relation to the coronavirus situation, was about how there's lots of advice about, personal protection and social distancing and all this kind of thing, but nobody's saying up your vitamin D intake, which is probably one of the most important things you can do to build your immunity. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think a probiotic, that builds your immunity because it gives you better microbiome health. You know what I mean? And there's little things like that which I think people don't take notice of. But I like the one what you said about, I think having, muscle mass and stuff like that, and not bodybuilding muscle mass, but I mean keeping your muscle not wasting away by being mobile and things. I think if that would probably save, would prolong lives. Surely, I mean, little things like that. So no, I think it's this. Look, we could unpack this stuff all day. I can talk forever.
Yeah.
I want to take this back to your experience of, certainly of the last couple of months, Peter. Okay. So you've obviously, I read somewhere you've grown by 500%, which is incredible numbers. But I think I read it on a news article or something. But I wasn't sure if that was on in terms of turnover or headcount. But you clearly have got a team there. You need to keep engaged and productive. And obviously, there's mental health considerations, people working from home, et cetera, et cetera. How have you managed to lead this company through this difficult period?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think, yeah, it's been a big challenge, right? I think for any for any team and founder coming in, knowing like how do you approach this? I think for us, firstly, it was obviously getting the team remote. So as everyone else went through, we have about 95 people at our kind of HQ, and we're just based off Old Street in London. So basically, it's basically Zoom, isn't it? Zoom and Slack. But then really thinking about how do people communicate? How do we keep things like OKR teams? How do we keep them in touch? Particularly frontline people, I think a lot of the time I'd always believed myself that there was a real premium on people always being face to face, being together. But I've been proven completely wrong, right? That actually any team, I think, can basically be productive and do it in the right way and still communicate remotely. So I think that was a big thing at the start. The other thing for us within the business was operationalizing Elder. So for us with the carers, to reduce the risk of transmission of COVID was extending the amount of time they'd spend with the customer. So for a period of time, instead of 3 weeks, we kind of went up closer to 8 weeks. And what that meant, that it was incredible to see carers being willing to do that for the people they're with. Because what it meant is you just reduce that risk of transmission. There's less people coming and going, and really being able to take hold of that. Other bits for us, we had to source our own PPE. So, we couldn't get any from the government or the hand. I think a lot of it was routing elsewhere. So, we had to go and get hundreds of thousands of items ourselves from China and fly them over and get it, then get that into every single house. So, you've then got to kind of package that into a central bit and package it up and get it into hundreds of homes across the UK, whether that's in Land's End or John O'Groats or Lord knows where else. So there's all sorts of operational challenges pretty unique to our model, which we had to wrestle with. And I think after that, to be honest, the other bit then is clearly, look, the company's thrived and done great, but for me, particularly as the leader, it's been thinking, well, how do you keep it going? Because I think probably all of us have seen at times, a couple of months in, there's a bit of fatigue there, right? Where all of a sudden you hadn't had that physical contact with your teammates. And, some people might be okay with that, but in a business like Elder, there's a lot of people that are really missing their mates and the people they work with. So it's then thinking about how do you keep that communication strong? So for me, we definitely do a lot more all company meetings. So that could be as small as we have a little 5-minute kickoff first thing on a Monday morning, that we didn't used to have, but we do it now because it's a great chance for people just to align quickly. I might deliver a couple of messages, some of my thinkings from the last week or so, all the way to changing the all hands. So we have an all hands every Thursday afternoon. So going through that, thinking about how to make that more interactive. For me, I've just spent a lot more time doing skip levels, so spending more time with different levels and different people in the business to get a feel for how things are going, and lots of other people doing that. So it requires real deliberate thought. And I think where we are now is that, particularly as a leadership team at Elder, thinking long term. So actually, what have the last 3 months taught us, and what are we actually going to do? For instance, our lease is actually coming up on our office at the moment. And then you've got to decide, what are we doing with this? Like, you know, it's a big
You need
cost,
that.
but you know,
Do you need all that space anymore? You know.
yeah, questions like that. And I think where my head's at, I really believe in still having I know some people now are thinking of going remote only. For me, I think the concept to me maybe being remote first, but I believe still in the value of space for people to come together.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be an OKR team working on something, or it could just be some of it's socializing. But those bits where I have a little sense for me that when I think about Elder and other companies, that the reason we succeeded at the start has been because we built up quite a lot of social capital, you know, over these last 4 years of people building those relationships and doing things. And I sense that it could degrade a bit over time, you know. So for me, it's definitely, I think, work from home and that flexible working, that is here to stay. And I'll hold my hands up. I was dead wrong. I was one of the biggest people saying, I don't know, I think we need to all be together all the time. And that's nonsense. But I still believe there's a value a couple of days a week, maybe, where people, you know, or at least teams come together and do their thing. But thinking all through all of this, you know, and I think that's the bit now for me, actually moving away from this kind of, you're navigating day to day, week to week, to actually thinking, all right, how's the culture and kind of the work setup going to change at Elder? So we're kind of going into that now.
Yeah. Do you know what? I interviewed Bruce Daisley, who is the ex VP of EMEA for Twitter. He's an author now. He's got a podcast and he's got a book, Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat. It's called The Joy of Work as well. It's got a different name in the US and the UK. But anyway, he's a workplace culture sort of specialist. You know what I mean? He's moved into that sort of thing now. He's written a book on it and stuff. So, and we were talking about where the balance lies between having your team because a lot of people thought like you, we need to be together all the time. I think that's relaxed with people through this journey. And now, well, certainly for us as well, we're thinking, well, you know, people are very productive when they work from home. We definitely need some together time. What's the ideal balance? You know what I mean? In the office 3 days a week, work from home 2, or I don't know, maybe half days in the office, half from home. I don't know. But I suppose everyone needs to find their biting point, don't they? What do you?
Yeah, it's unique for every business, right? I think, yeah, it is those things. I think interestingly for us, my sense for Elder is I think it's probably something mostly, yeah, there will be those few days a week where certain teams are coming together or people, and there is that piece where, look, let's use this time to when we really need to spend time, there's a premium on being face to face and with each other, whether that's tackling some of the harder problems, whether that's when there's a slightly bigger group that needs to kind of, especially at the early stages, if you think about maybe the start of an OKR cycle and you're doing all the brainstorming and the kind of the point of inception on what you're going to build, that's definitely harder to do remote in my view. So I think on some of those new people that have just joined the company, like them getting to get to know, you know, we've had, I think, 17 people at Elder join since we've been fully remote. So they've never been in the office. So for them, I think, you know, they, you know, letting them meet in person, the people they do work with and see on Zoom calls. But I think the interesting bit after that is then how do you set the office up? You know, how do you set up the environment? Is it, at the moment, we've got each team has sections and you've got your own defined desk and you've got, no doubt, you've got I am guilty of this. I've got loads of shit around my desk. But now how do you make it probably where it's more kind of, look, you'll come in, but sit anywhere, or, you know, or where do you sit? Is it more hot desking, or how do you set the office up for that communication? I think a big challenge for companies, if you're going to have a mix of people in an office and people work from home, is we've all been in those meetings where there's maybe 2 people working from home and there's 4 people in a room, and then you've got that horrible, it's just a weird dynamic. So I think you have to have that remote first mindset where, look, everyone has to dial in individually and let's have this meeting as if we're all at home. But then how do you do that if some of the people are in an office? There's any number of things that have to be thought through. But I kind of like it. It's a good challenge. I think, again, look, this is where the best companies see this as opportunity. Like, how do we leverage the increased productivity and our team members enjoying it and getting more from their life and work by working in this way? But, you know, how do you adapt to that? But I think, you know, when you've got smart people in a business, it's just another problem to be solved, isn't it? And you've got to get up and go after it. Yeah.
Well, you just got to trust people to get on with it, haven't you? And just trust them to work in the way that suits them. You had Series B funding earlier this year, then, and you obviously want to scale it. You want to push this ahead. What does the next 12 to 24 months look like for Elder?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Yeah, so we bought on Acton Capital, based out of Munich, as our new lead investor with the B. So we raised 8 million in January, and we've raised about 17 in total now. So definitely now we're at a kind of growth stage where for Elder, I think the scale we've got to and the revenue, right, we clearly have something that customers and carers like, and there's been growing quickly, and more of them are coming towards us wanting to use it. So I think for me, when I look 12 months, for instance, it's, if I'm honest, it's just the service, just making the experience better and better and better. And I think when you have to be very aware of things like unit economics and growth and all of those things, but you have to, I think the main thing is that you have to obsess about what are the customers and the carers experiencing and the families day to day. Like, is this something that is 10 times better than anything else out there? And I think for us, particularly because we're very focused on a particular type of care, this is full-time care. It's completely different from the visiting care or the care sector. So we've spent the last 4 years, and we're the only one that really had that focus. And that's showing, I think, for our, we have a +70 NPS score. So, we're seeing from customers that, like, to get that sort of score in an environment when you're delivering a service as tough as care, and you're with the customer 24/7, this isn't delivering a pizza. That's hard. So it's been great to get that feedback from the customers and the carers. And that is, so when I think about the business, it's like relative to the size of the care home sector, we're still pretty small, so we're growing incredibly quickly, and, but there's so much more to do, and the amount of the population each year, the number of people in the UK that need this service, it's not like we need to go and launch in 20 countries tomorrow. This is a £20 billion a year market that's growing at 7% a year, where there really is a lack of, like you said, innovation and change. And it won't just be us alone, but we want to be one of the ones doing it. So the next 12 months is head down and just keep working on that. But there are some really interesting bits beyond that. I think, when we look at things like care funding, so how people finance their care, thousands of our customers are always asking us, like, can you help me with this? How do I do this? And it's something for us, we're definitely helping a lot on the content side at the moment, but we've got some pretty interesting partnerships and other things we're looking at there. People wanting help getting things in and out of the home, medication, food, other stuff. For us, I very much see Elder as we own this relationship where the customer's trusting us at the moment with care. But it's pretty interesting to think, I think if you are successful with that and you prove that trust, it's kind of an amazing place to jump off from and potentially kind of go deeper and help people with other things. And of course, then in time, I think in my last business, we've got a lot of international expansion experience in the business, myself and others, where we've done that before. And I don't think that's an immediate thing for us at the moment, but, there's a lot of interesting countries out there who have the exact same challenge, whether that's in America, whether that's in Western Europe, Asia. There's a lot of places out there with kind of some very similar parallels on the demography, how fast people there are aging and getting older. Particularly, actually, if you look at Japan, for instance, they're probably where we'll be in 8 to 10 years. And, they now sell more nappies for adults than they do for children. So that gives you a feel for kind of where they are. And
that's unbelievable.
The challenges they have trying to care for people. So they've gone very heavy into robotics and other stuff, and they're looking for some of that assisted. But for me, ultimately, the reason I'm so bullish on what we do at Elder is there'll always be a premium. You can't replace a human in that sense when it comes to the not being helping someone get out of a chair, but making them feel at ease, helping them live the life they want to live, engaging with them, keeping that kind of that spark in their eye. That's the bit for me where that's what an amazing carer does. I think you really know your job's done when they kind of, your customers say it's like another, it's like another daughter to my mom or someone like that. It's if you can deliver on that, it's that sort of service. So in time, maybe there'll be other countries as well where we can actually pick up some of the slack and do our bit to help as well.
Definitely. Okay, let me end on this one then, because I know we're coming towards the end now. What have you sort of done to keep yourself fresh? Have there been any new hobbies you've picked up? Any books you've read? Any snippets of wisdom, or even a film or anything that's give you a different perspective on things?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. New stuff. I've definitely. Actually, one thing I'll tell you, I got it for my wife more, but we got a Peloton bike, and she's obsessed with that. So I used to hate cycling and all the spin class stuff. It wasn't my bag at all, but actually I've been getting quite into that. So that's good fun. I tend to do a bit of running, so I've been like adding a bit of biking into it in the house, which has been good fun. I think as well for me is staying close to like family members. Like one thing this does give you is a little bit more time, and it's trying to get that balance right. I think with my personality, if I'm honest, I find it a bit harder because then for me, work and life become one where I'll end up working even more. So I've had to try and check myself on that and make sure that, taking that time to, spend time, check in with family more. mate, friends, my brother, all those sorts of things. But you know what? Yeah, in terms of, I wish I could say, look, I've read all these amazing books and I've done all this and all of these things, but it's been pretty mental with Elder and that other stuff. So I haven't. But I tell you what, I have. It's blown me away how the business, I think, reacted to this and the people at Elder. So actually, as tough as this time has been, I'd say I've enjoyed it. It's not like it's been a hellish experience. It's been something different. And it keeps you on your toes and keeps you feeling fresh.
What advice would you give to business leaders who are struggling during this time to keep their teams motivated and just keep things fresh and stuff like that? Anything you've learned from benefiting from your experience of scaling two businesses? What kind of short piece of advice would you give to a young up and coming entrepreneur or an entrepreneur who's going through a bad time right now?
I think in terms of keeping people motivated, just over communicate. I think definitely one of the lessons for me has been, especially as a company starts to grow and get bigger, it may seem to you that you're sick of the hearing what you're saying, but that probably means you're saying it about the right amount. Like, you need to spend time. So for me at the moment, adding that first thing on a Monday thing for the whole company, refreshing and thinking about how the all hands needs to change. We do a wrap up every Friday where we celebrate our employees of the week, and we celebrate anniversaries and birthdays and lots of different stuff. Really take those times, invest in that stuff, spend the amount of leverage you'll get as a leader from doing those things well and doing them right is amazing. That's a one-to-many time when you're speaking to a lot of people, and you can really you only need to land one or two key messages, but it's so important you do. And I think it's very easy if you're just a CEO or founder, say, it doesn't matter, we can skip that this week or we don't. Be very careful doing that. That stuff, that's the fabric of what you're doing. You need to have that in a business where, I think what's so hard for us sometimes when you're a founder and CEO, you have so much information. You've got all this stuff and you're all up to speed and you're running ahead. You've got to take people on the journey. You're in the driving seat. You've got to show people the sights in the car on the way through and let them know where you are. And I think that's definitely for me, from a learning perspective, has been really share information and be vulnerable as a leader as well. You don't have to be some kind of, imagine your house is on fire. Oh, everything's fine, don't worry. Be honest about where you are. And for all of us, if you have to make tough decisions, whether that's costs or people, explain to people why it's happening and show them and bring them in. I think don't be scared of showing them any board related stuff and others. You want kind of, for me, whether it's your shareholders, your boards, your team members, right the way all through the business, you want everyone to kind of be on the same page. You shouldn't be kind of trying to manage people in different ways. So yeah, I'd say that, particularly on the communication side, I think that's a great area to invest in, because it really can and does pay off.
That's brilliant advice. Thank you for that, Peter. Well, look, I've really enjoyed this one. You've been a great guest. Some amazing snippets of wisdom there, and an amazing story and journey. And I think you're doing some great stuff in a really important sector. And I wish you all the best with your future endeavours.
Cheers for having me. Absolute pleasure. Thanks, man.